My name is Audrey. I am 30 years old and I work as a forensic accountant, finding hidden assets for high-stakes divorces. I have spent my entire life balancing ledgers and uncovering lies. But the biggest fraud I ever encountered was not in a corporate boardroom. It was right here in this manicured backyard in Greenwich, Connecticut. Last Saturday, at my own engagement party, my father, Richard, tapped a silver spoon against his crystal champagne flute to call for silence. The white tent was filled with 60 of their closest friends and business associates. My mother, Linda, stood next to him, beaming in a pastel Chanel suit that I knew for a fact was paid for with my credit card. My father cleared his throat and looked at my fiancé, Liam. He put on his best country club smile and said, "Congratulations, son. You are a brave man for taking this burden off our hands. Audrey has always been an expensive investment with very low returns. We are officially transferring the liability to you today. No returns allowed." The guests chuckled politely, as if it was just a harmless father of the bride joke. My younger sister, Jessica, who was sipping a mimosa in the front row, let out a loud laugh that sounded more like a bark of triumph. She whispered to her husband, Marcus, loud enough for me to hear. Finally. Maybe now I can turn her bedroom into the walk-in closet I actually deserve. My mother wiped a fake tear from her eye and nodded in agreement. The humiliation burned my cheeks, but I did not look down. I did not cry. Beside me, Liam went rigid. His hand squeezed mine so hard, his knuckles turned white. I could feel the anger radiating off him. He started to step forward to say something to defend me, to shut them down. But I squeezed his hand back. I signaled him to stop. I did not need him to fight this battle for me. My parents thought they were celebrating the departure of their family scapegoat. They thought they were finally free of the daughter they called a burden. But as I raised my glass to toast their cruelty, I felt the sharp corner of a heavy envelope resting inside my beaded clutch purse. I had opened it just 3 hours ago in the privacy of my car. It was a certified letter from my late grandmother's estate attorney, a letter that had been lost in the mail system for exactly 1 year. My parents had no idea that the $2.4 million estate we were standing on, the pool they swam in, the roof over their heads, it did not belong to them. According to the trust my grandmother set up 10 years ago, the entire property had legally transferred to me on my 30th birthday. They were not the lords of the manor kicking out a servant. They were guests in my house, and I was about to serve them an eviction notice they would never forget. Before I tell you how I turned their celebration into their worst nightmare, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Your support helps me expose the truth. Now let me take you back to the moment the champagne bubbles went flat. The air in Greenwich that afternoon was humid and smelled of expensive perfume and cut grass. To an outsider, the party looked perfect. My mother had hired the best catering company in the state. There were trays of lobster rolls and towers of imported macaroons. The floral arrangements alone cost $4,000. I knew the price because I was the one who wired the money to the florist on Tuesday morning. That was the dynamic in the Carver house. My parents played the role of the wealthy socialites, and I was the silent bank account that kept the lights on. For 8 years, I had paid the mortgage. I had paid for my sister Jessica's degree in art history, which she never used. I had paid for my father's classic car repairs. I did it because I was desperate for their approval. I thought, if I just wrote one more check, if I just solved one more crisis, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Jessica. But standing there, listening to my father call me a liability, I realized the checkbook was closed forever. I looked at Liam. He was the only person in this entire gathering who knew the real Audrey. He knew that I drove a 6-year-old Honda, so my mother could lease a Mercedes. He knew I packed my lunch every day, so my sister could go to brunch. He was a sommelier who owned his own wine cellar, and he had offered to pay for this party. But my father had refused, saying he wanted to do something nice for his little girl. The irony was that my father had charged the deposit to a joint credit card that was linked to my savings account. He was literally using my own money to fund a party where he could publicly insult me. My mother approached us as the applause died down. She looked me up and down with a critical eye. She reached out and adjusted the strap of my dress, pinching my skin in the process. "Smile, Audrey," she hissed under her breath. "You look so severe. Try to look less like a calculator and more like a happy bride. You are embarrassing us." Jessica walked up behind her, linking arms with Mom. She looked at my engagement ring and smirked. It is a little small, isn't it, Mom? I mean, I guess it is cute if you like that budget look, but Marcus would never let me wear something so tiny. Marcus? My brother-in-law looked down at his shoes. He was a good man, a pediatric surgeon who worked 80 hours a week, but he was completely blind to how manipulative my sister was. He gave me an apologetic look, but he didn't say anything. He never did. I took a slow sip of my wine. The old Audrey would have apologized. The old Audrey would have tried to make a joke to lighten the mood. But the Audrey who had read the letter in the car was gone. In her place was a woman who knew exactly who owned the ground beneath our feet. I looked at my mother and smiled. A genuine cold smile. "You are right, Mom," I said. "I should smile more. After all, today is a day of big changes." My father laughed, clapping Liam on the shoulder. "That is right. Big changes. We are getting my office back. I am going to turn Audrey's old room into a cigar lounge." I gripped my purse tighter. The letter inside explained everything. My grandmother had never trusted my father with money. She knew he was a gambler and a narcissist. When she died, she left the house in a trust with my parents as trustees only until I turned 30. They were supposed to hand over the deed a year ago. Instead, they had hidden the will, forged the extension papers, and hoped I would never find out. They thought if they married me off, I would be too busy with a new life to investigate the family finances. They underestimated what I do for a living. I find hidden money for a living. And I had just found the jackpot. I looked my father dead in the eye. "That sounds like a lovely plan, Dad," I said. "But you might want to hold off on buying those cigars." "Why is that?" he asked, looking confused. "Because I have a feeling the room allocation is going to be very different by Monday morning." He frowned, but before he could ask what I meant, I turned to Liam. "Get the car," I whispered. "We are leaving, but the cake hasn't been cut." My mother screeched. "We paid $500 for that cake. Actually, I paid for it." I corrected her, keeping my voice level. "So I suggest you eat my slice." I turned my back on them and walked toward the driveway. I could hear them muttering about how ungrateful and rude I was. Let them talk. I was going home to meet with my lawyer. The next time they saw me, I wouldn't be their daughter. I would be their landlord. And rent was about to be due. I did not make it to the car. I barely made it past the swinging double doors of the kitchen before a manicured hand clamped around my bicep and yanked me back. It was Jessica. The heavy doors swung shut behind us, muting the sounds of the string quartet and the laughter of the guests outside. The kitchen was chaotic, filled with catering staff in black uniforms rushing back and forth with trays of half-eaten lobster and empty champagne flutes. The air smelled of stale grease and expensive seafood. Jessica did not care about the staff watching. She never noticed people she considered beneath her. She backed me up against the stainless steel refrigerator, her eyes wide not with concern, but with panic. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed. Her voice was low and sharp. "We have not even done the cake cutting yet. If you leave now, everyone will talk. Do you know how hard Mom worked on this image?" I pulled my arm away from her grip, smoothing out the fabric of my dress. I stared at her. My younger sister looked like a princess in her designer silk dress, a dress that cost $3,000, a dress that was charged to my American Express card last month under the category of wedding essentials. "I am leaving, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I am tired. And frankly, I do not think anyone out there will miss me. They have the open bar. That is all they really care about." Jessica rolled her eyes. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She slammed it against the refrigerator door next to my head. It was an invoice, the catering bill. "Stop being dramatic, Audrey," she said. "If you are leaving, you need to handle this first. The head caterer is threatening to pack up the dessert station if the final balance is not settled immediately. Mom said your card was declined when they tried to run the deposit this morning. Fix it." I looked at the number at the bottom of the invoice. $15,000. $15,000 for a party where I was the punchline of every joke. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You want me to pay $15,000 for my own humiliation? Ask Dad. He's the one out there bragging about his investments. Or ask your husband, the surgeon." Jessica scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Marcus is saving for our nursery renovation. We are not touching his savings for a party. And you know Dad is liquidating some assets right now, so his cash flow is tight. Besides, you are the one marrying Liam. He owns a winery, for God's sake. You're about to be set for life. Don't be stingy with your family just because you struck gold. Consider it a thank you gift for everything we have done for you. Everything you have done for me. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like a bad joke. Just then, the kitchen door swung open again, and my mother, Linda, swept in. She saw the standoff and immediately sided with Jessica. Of course she did. In the history of the Carver family, I was always the defendant, and they were always the judge and jury. Audrey, write the check, Linda commanded. She did not even ask what the problem was. She just assumed I was being difficult. This is your engagement party. It is tradition for the bride to handle the details. Besides, you are leaving us. You are going off to live your new fancy life with Liam and leaving us behind to manage this big empty house. The least you can do is clear the accounts before you abandon your duties. Abandon my duties. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the kitchen faded into a dull roar. I looked at my mother and my sister, and suddenly I wasn't seeing them in the present. I was seeing a montage of the last 10 years playing out in my mind, a highlight reel of my financial abuse. I remembered the day I got my first big bonus as a junior accountant. I was 24 years old. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 6 months, sleeping under my desk, eating vending machine crackers. I came home so proud, ready to start my own savings account. But I found my mother crying at the kitchen table. She told me the bank was threatening foreclosure. She said Dad had made a bad investment and we were going to lose the house. I felt sick. I felt responsible. I handed over my entire bonus check, $30,000. It was supposed to fix the roof and pay the mortgage. Later, I found out there was no foreclosure threat. The roof wasn't leaking. They used my $30,000 to renovate the master bathroom and buy a new home theater system. When I confronted them, Dad just laughed and said, "We raised you. You owe us." I blinked and the memory shifted. I was 26, sitting in a cold lawyer's office. My father had run a red light in his sports car and hit a delivery van. He was drunk. He had no insurance because he had skipped the payments to buy golf clubs. The driver of the van was threatening to sue for everything we had. Dad was facing jail time. I drained my 401k. I liquidated my stocks. I came up with $45,000 to settle out of court and pay for the damage. I saved his reputation. I saved him from prison. And how did he thank me? He told me I should have negotiated better because $45,000 seemed excessive. And then there was Jessica, my golden sister. I remembered the day she got into NYU. We were all so happy. But then the tuition bill came. Dad said he couldn't afford it. Jessica cried for 3 days straight, threatening to run away. So I stepped in. I was the big sister. I was the protector. I took out a personal loan. I worked freelance jobs on the weekends. For 4 years, I paid her tuition, her rent, her sorority dues. $200,000. $200,000 so she could get a degree she never used. And when she graduated, she didn't thank me. She posted a photo on Instagram with Dad captioned, "Thanks to the best daddy in the world for making my dreams come true." The rage rose up in my throat, tasting like bile. I looked at the catering invoice again. $15,000. It was a drop in the ocean compared to what I had already lost. I looked at my mother. Her face was perfectly made up, not a wrinkle of worry. She truly believed she was entitled to my money. She believed I existed solely to subsidize their lifestyle. "Fine," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, detached. I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. My mother let out a sigh of relief and adjusted her pearl necklace. Jessica smirked, grabbing a pen from the counter and handing it to me. "I knew you would be reasonable," Jessica said. "Just make it out to Elite Catering. And hurry up, the photographer is waiting for the cake shot." I uncapped the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. This was it, the final transaction. I wasn't just paying for lobster and champagne. I was paying for my freedom. This $15,000 was the severance package. It was the price of admission to the show I was about to direct. If I refused to pay now, they would cause a scene. They would drag Liam into it. They would ruin the night and play the victim. But if I paid, if I gave them exactly what they wanted one last time, they would never see the train coming. They would think I was still their obedient little ATM machine. They would let their guard down. I wrote the date. I wrote the name of the catering company. I filled in the amount. $15,000 and 0 cents. My hand was steady, steadier than it had ever been. Here I said, ripping the check out of the book. The sound of the paper tearing was sharp and satisfying. I handed it to Jessica. She snatched it from my fingers, checking the amount immediately to make sure I hadn't shorted them. Perfect, she said, flashing a fake smile. See, that wasn't so hard, was it? Now go fix your lipstick. You look washed out. My mother patted my cheek, a gesture that was meant to be affectionate but felt like a slap. Good girl, she said. We will see you out there. Don't take too long. We need to take the family portrait. They turned and walked back toward the swinging doors, their heels clicking on the tile floor. They were already chatting about the lighting for the photos, completely forgetting I existed the moment they got the money. I stood there alone in the kitchen, clutching my checkbook. I looked at the carbon copy of the check I had just written. Memo engagement party. I closed the checkbook and put it back in my purse next to the letter from the lawyer. Enjoy the cake, Mom, I whispered to the empty room. Enjoy the champagne, Jessica, because starting tomorrow, you're going to learn what the word budget actually means. And trust me, it is going to be a very steep learning curve. I turned and walked out the back door into the cool night air. I did not go back to the party. I did not say goodbye. I walked straight to Liam's car where he was waiting with the engine running. He looked at me, his eyes full of concern. Did they hurt you? He asked. I buckled my seatbelt and looked back at the glowing tent in the backyard. I could see the silhouettes of my family dancing. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. No, I said. I paid the bill. Liam looked confused. You paid them? After what they said? I smiled. And this time, it was a real smile. A dangerous smile. I paid them, Liam. It is an investment. And I'm about to collect the dividends. Drive. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. My house, my rules, the game had officially begun. Monday morning in Manhattan always felt like a battlefield, but today I was the one bringing the ammunition. I stepped out of the elevator onto the 42nd floor of a glass skyscraper in Midtown. The office of Sterling and Associates was quiet. It smelled of old leather and serious money. This was not the kind of law firm that handled traffic tickets or petty lawsuits. This was where generational wealth was managed and where family secrets were buried deep in ironclad contracts. I was here to meet with Arthur Sterling. He had been my grandmother's personal attorney for 40 years. He was the only person she trusted. When I walked into the conference room, Mr. Sterling was already standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He turned around when he heard the door close. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp. There was no small talk. He did not ask about my engagement or my job. He gestured for me to sit at the long mahogany table. In the center of the table sat a thick leather binder and the certified letter I had received on Saturday. Thank you for coming in on such short notice, Audrey, he said. His voice was gravelly and serious. I want to personally apologize for the delay of that letter. It was sent via a private courier service that unfortunately went bankrupt last year. The correspondence was lost in a warehouse until a liquidation audit found it last week. It should have been delivered to you exactly 1 year ago on your 30th birthday. I nodded slowly. The delay was annoying, but it was the content that mattered. I placed my hands on the table to stop them from trembling. I needed answers. Mr. Sterling opened the binder. He pushed a document toward me. It was yellowed with age, but the signature at the bottom was unmistakable. It was my grandmother's elegant cursive script. Your grandmother, Eleanor, was a very perceptive woman, Audrey, Mr. Sterling began. She loved you very much, but she did not love your father. She knew Richard was reckless with money. She knew he had a gambling problem and a need to appear wealthy that exceeded his actual talent for earning. She also knew that your mother enabled him. I listened in silence. This was not news to me. When Eleanor passed away 10 years ago, the family was told that the Greenwich estate and the investment portfolio were left to your father. Mr. Sterling continued. That was the narrative Richard and Linda told everyone. That is the narrative they told you. But that is not what the will says. He tapped the document with his index finger. The estate was placed into the Audrey Carver Trust. Your parents were named as trustees. Their only role was to maintain the property and manage the investments until the beneficiary reached the age of maturity. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The beneficiary. That is right, Mr. Sterling said, seeing the realization on my face. You are the beneficiary, Audrey. The house is not theirs. It never was. They were essentially caretakers, living rent-free until you turned 30. On your 30th birthday, full ownership of the property and the remaining capital in the investment fund was supposed to transfer legally to your name. I sat back in the chair feeling like the air had been punched out of my lungs. My 30th birthday was last year. For an entire year, I had been living in an apartment paying rent while my parents lived in my house. But it was worse than that. Wait, I said. My voice was barely a whisper. If the house was supposed to transfer to me last year, why didn't it happen? Why didn't you call me? Mr. Sterling sighed. He flipped to the next page of the binder. This is where it gets criminal, Audrey. As trustees, your parents had a fiduciary duty to inform you. But 2 weeks before your 30th birthday, we received this document. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a waiver of notification and a request for extension. It stated that I, Audrey Carver, was fully aware of the trust, but wished to decline ownership for another 5 years due to personal instability. It claimed I was mentally unfit to manage the asset and requested that Richard and Linda Carver remain as controlling trustees. At the bottom of the page was my signature, but I never signed this, I said. I touched the ink on the page. It looked like my signature. It was a perfect copy, but I knew I had never seen this document before. I know you didn't, Mr. Sterling said darkly. We suspected it was a forgery, but we couldn't prove it without your testimony. And since we couldn't reach you because your parents had intercepted all our previous mailings, we were stuck. They successfully blocked the transfer. They stole a year of your life, Audrey. And they stole a lot more than that. He opened a spreadsheet. It was a forensic accounting of the trust's liquid assets. When your grandmother died, she left $2 million in a maintenance fund to pay for the taxes and upkeep of the house, so the property would never be a burden to you. Look at the balance today. I looked at the number at the bottom of the column. $17.42. They drained it, I whispered. They didn't just drain it, Mr. Sterling said. They pillaged it. They used the maintenance fund to pay for their country club memberships. They used it to lease luxury cars. They used it to pay for your sister's lifestyle. And the most ironic part is that they used your money, the money that was legally yours, to pay for the lawyers who helped them draft this fake extension. My head was spinning. I closed my eyes and suddenly everything made sense. The constant comments about me being a burden, the way they demanded I pay for things. It was all a projection. They were the burdens. They were the parasites. Every time I paid a bill for them, I was essentially paying rent to live in my own stolen property. When my father toasted to getting rid of me at the engagement party, he wasn't joking. He was terrified. He wanted me out of the house and married off so I wouldn't be around to notice the mail or question the finances. They wanted to keep the con going for another 5 years until there was nothing left. I opened my eyes. The shock was gone. In its place was a cold, hard rage. I looked at the spreadsheet again. I looked at the forged signature. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my life catching people who tried to hide money. And my own parents were the sloppiest criminals I had ever seen. So what does this mean legally, I asked. I am 31 now. The letter arrived late. Does that change anything? Mr. Sterling leaned forward, clasping his hands. The delay of the letter is irrelevant now that you are here. The forgery is a felony. The embezzlement of trust funds is a felony. We can file a lawsuit today. We can have them arrested for fraud. We can freeze their personal accounts, although I suspect they don't have any personal money left. We can evict them immediately. He paused, watching me closely. Or we can play this differently. I looked at the view of the city. I thought about the engagement party. I thought about the $15,000 check I wrote for the catering. I thought about Jessica's smirk. I thought about my mother pinching my arm and telling me to smile. If we arrest them now, I said slowly, thinking it through, they will play the victim. They will tell everyone I am a vindictive daughter who is suing her elderly parents. They will cry to the neighbors. They will spin the story. Jessica will go on social media and paint me as a monster. Mr. Sterling nodded. Precisely. The court of public opinion does not always follow the court of law. I do not just want the house back, Mr. Sterling, I said, turning to face him. I want my dignity back. I want them to be exposed. I want everyone they have lied to for the last 10 years to see them for exactly what they are. I want to catch them in a trap so tight they can't wiggle out of it with a fake tear or a charming smile. I picked up the forged document. They think I am stupid. They think I am obedient. They think they have another 4 years of free living. I looked at Mr. Sterling. Do not file the lawsuit yet. Do not freeze the accounts. Let them think they are safe. But Audrey, Mr. Sterling warned if we wait, they might try to leverage the house again. I see here they are trying to get a second mortgage using the trust deed. Let them try, I said. They can't sign for a mortgage without the trustee authority, and since I am now aware of the trust, I can block it quietly from the bank's end without them knowing why. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to sweat. I pulled a notepad from my purse. Here is what we are going to do. You are going to prepare the eviction papers, but you are not going to serve them yet. You are going to transfer the title of the house into a holding company. Let's call it Justice Served LLC. Mr. Sterling smiled for the first time. A small, dry smile, and then I continued, I am going to buy the debt. You said they have personal debts outside the trust, right? Mr. Sterling flipped a page. Extensive. Credit cards. Personal loans. They are drowning Audrey. Good, I said. Buy it all. Every cent of debt they owe to every bank and credit card company. I want to own their debt. I want to be the one holding the leash. Use the remaining assets in my own personal savings to cover it. But why, Mr. Sterling asked. Because I said standing up and buttoning my coat next week is Thanksgiving, and I think it is time the landlord paid a visit to the tenants. I walked to the window and looked down at the streets of Manhattan. People looked like ants from up here. My parents had treated me like an ant for 30 years. They thought they could step on me whenever they wanted. They had no idea that I was the one holding the magnifying glass. I turned back to the lawyer. Draw up the papers, Mr. Sterling. And one more thing. I want a full forensic audit of every penny they spent since the day I turned 18. I want an itemized list of every steak dinner, every vacation, every pair of shoes. When I throw them out on the street, I want to hand them a bill for every single cent they stole. Mr. Sterling closed the binder with a heavy thud. It will be ready by Friday, he said. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I checked my reflection in the metal panel. I didn't look like the tired girl who cried in the bathroom at her engagement party anymore. I looked like a CEO. I looked like a woman who was about to execute a hostile takeover of her own life. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Audrey Jessica needs to borrow your car tomorrow. Hers is in the shop. Drop it off by 8 a.m. Don't be late. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. Even after humiliation, even after I paid their bills, they still demanded more. I typed a reply. Sorry, Mom. Can't do it. But I'll bring something else over soon. Something you've earned. I deleted the text before sending it. No warnings. I put the phone back in my pocket. Let Jessica walk. Let them all walk. Because pretty soon they wouldn't have a driveway to park in anyway. 3 days after meeting with the lawyer, I pulled into the driveway of the Greenwich house. My house. It looked different to me now. Before I used to look at those white columns and manicured hedges and feel a sense of intimidation. I used to feel like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. But today, as I put my Honda in park, I looked at the property with the eyes of an owner inspecting a damaged asset. The grass was getting long. The paint on the shutters was peeling slightly. My tenants were not taking good care of the place. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I had skipped makeup today. I wore an old sweater and jeans. I needed to look desperate. I needed to look like a woman who was about to lose everything. This was the final test. A part of me, the small broken child who still wanted her parents' love, hoped they would surprise me. I hoped that if I came to them in a moment of true crisis, they would step up. But the forensic accountant in me knew better. The numbers never lie, and neither does human nature. I walked into the house without knocking. I found them in the living room. It was a Tuesday afternoon, but naturally nobody was working. My father, Richard, was sitting in his leather recliner, browsing a catalog for luxury humidors. My mother, Linda, was on the sofa with Jessica looking at fabric swatches. Oh, look who it is, my mother said, not looking up from a swatch of velvet. We thought you were busy packing for your new life. Jessica says you haven't answered her texts about the car. I stood in the center of the room, wringing my hands. I let my shoulders slump. I can't lend Jessica the car, Mom, I said, keeping my voice shaky. Actually, I came here because I need to talk to you guys. It is serious. Something in my tone made my father look up. He closed the cigar catalog. What is it, Audrey? He asked. You are not pregnant, are you? Because we are not raising another child. No, I said, taking a deep breath. It is Liam, his business. Jessica perked up. What about the winery? Did he sell it? Is he rich yet? I looked down at the floor. No. There was a problem with the latest shipment from France. The temperature control failed in the shipping container. $50,000 worth of vintage wine turned to vinegar. Insurance is denying the claim because of a paperwork error. My mother gasped. Well, that is careless. I hope he doesn't expect us to pity him. Business is for men who pay attention to details. He is in trouble, Mom. I continued pressing on the wound. He has a payroll to meet on Friday. If he misses it, his staff will walk out. He just needs a bridge loan, just until the lawsuit with the shipping company is settled. The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. I watched my father's face transform. The bored arrogance was replaced by a defensive wall. How much, I asked softly. We need $5,000, I said. Just $5,000. I have $3,000 in my savings, but I gave you the rest for the engagement party catering. If you could just lend us $5,000, I promise we will pay you back with interest in 2 months. $5,000. It was a comical amount. It was less than the price of the couch my mother was sitting on. It was less than the cost of the dress Jessica wore last Saturday. I had given them hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Surely they could spare $5,000 to save my future husband's livelihood. My father stood up. He walked over to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel, posing like the lord of the manor. Audrey, he began, his voice stern and lecturing. We are very disappointed. You chose to marry a man who clearly cannot manage his own finances. And now you come running back to the bank of Dad the moment things get tough. Dad, please, I pleaded, fighting the urge to vomit. It is an emergency. You know I have always helped you. I paid off your car accident. I paid for Jessica's school. I have never asked for anything. That is different, my mother cut in. You were living under our roof. You were contributing to the family. That was your duty. But now you are leaving. You are taking on a new family. Your loyalty should be to them, not dragging us down with you. We don't have $5,000 lying around to throw into a sinking ship, my father added. We have expenses. We have this house to maintain. I looked around the room. But Dad, you are looking at cigar humidors that cost $2,000. Mom is looking at velvet curtains. You have the money. That is our money. My father shouted, his face turning red. We earned it. I have worked my whole life to provide this house for you people. This is my legacy. This is my property, and I will not sell a single brick of it to save your incompetent boyfriend. I bit my lip. There it was. My property. My legacy. So you won't help, I asked, clarifying for the record. Even after everything I have done, you are saying no to $5,000. My mother stood up and smoothed her skirt. We are doing this for your own good, Audrey. You need to learn independence. If we bail you out now, you will never learn. Besides, Jessica needs us right now. She's looking at nursery furniture. We have to prioritize the grandchildren. I looked at Jessica. She was scrolling through her phone, avoiding my eyes. She didn't say a word. She didn't offer to help, even though I had paid her rent for 4 years. I see, I said. My voice was no longer shaky. It was flat, cold. I understand where I stand. You are being dramatic, Audrey, my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. Go home. Tell Liam to get a loan from a bank like a real businessman, and don't come back here until you have fixed this mess. We don't want negative energy in this house. I looked at my father one last time. He had already gone back to his catalog. Okay, I said. I won't come back until I have fixed it. I turned around and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it quietly. It was the quietest I had ever been. I walked down the front steps, my heart pounding in my chest, not from sadness, but from adrenaline. The test was complete. They had failed spectacularly. They had claimed ownership of my house one last time. They had refused to give me a crumb of the loaf I had baked for them. As I reached for the handle of my car door, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel behind me. I tensed up, thinking my father was coming out to yell at me some more. Audrey, wait. I turned around. It was Marcus, my brother-in-law. He was wearing scrubs, looking tired, like he had just come off a 24-hour shift. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark skin that looked even darker against the white siding of the house. He always looked out of place here, not because of his race, but because he was the only person in the family who actually worked for a living. He looked back at the house to make sure nobody was watching, then he stepped closer to me. I heard what happened, he said quietly. I was in the kitchen getting water. I forced a tight smile. It is fine, Marcus. I shouldn't have asked. I know things are tight for everyone. Marcus shook his head. He reached into the back pocket of his scrubs and pulled out a thick envelope. It was white and wrinkled. This is cash, he said, shoving it into my hand. It is $2,000. It is my stash for emergency medical equipment, but I want you to have it. I looked at the envelope, then up at his eyes. They were kind and filled with shame. Marcus, I can't take this, I said. Jessica said you guys are saving for the nursery. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. The nursery. Yeah. Look, Audrey, take the money. Please, I know how they are. I know what you have done for them. Jessica doesn't tell me everything, but I am not blind. I see the checks you write. I see how they treat you. He looked at the house with a mix of anger and exhaustion. They are wrong, he said. Liam is a good guy. You're a good sister. You shouldn't have to beg them for help. I held the envelope. $2,000. It wasn't enough to solve the fake problem I had invented, but it was enough to prove that Marcus was decent. He was a victim in this just like I was. He was married to a narcissist and being bled dry by her parents. I can't take this, Marcus, I said, pushing the envelope back toward him. Liam will be fine. I promise. We will figure it out. Take it, he insisted, pushing it back. Please, just don't tell Jessica. She thinks we don't have it. If she knew I had cash, she would spend it on a stroller we don't need yet. I paused. That was interesting. Jessica was lying to him about money too. I took the envelope. Not because I needed it, but because rejecting it would hurt his pride. Thank you, Marcus, I said softly. You are a good man. You deserve better than this. He shrugged, looking defeated. We are family, right? That is what family does. I looked at him, and for the first time I felt a pang of guilt. When I dropped the hammer on this family, Marcus was going to get hit by the shrapnel. I needed to protect him. Marcus, listen to me, I said, lowering my voice. Keep your money separate. Do you hear me? Whatever you earn, put it in an account Jessica can't access. He frowned, confused. Why? What is going on? Just trust me, I said. A storm is coming, and you don't want to be standing next to my parents when it hits. Before he could ask any more questions, the front door opened. Jessica stuck her head out. Marcus, she yelled, get in here. Mom wants to measure the windows for the nursery. And Audrey, are you still here? Go home. Marcus sighed, the sound of a man who had given up. I have to go, he said. Good luck with Liam. He turned and jogged back up the steps, disappearing into the house that was about to be a war zone. I got into my car and threw the envelope of cash onto the passenger seat. $2,000 from the man they were actively trying to scam. $0 from the parents who were living on my dime. I started the engine. The sadness was completely gone now. It had been replaced by a cold, clinical precision. I pulled my phone out and dialed Mr. Sterling's number. Hello, Audrey. His voice answered on the first ring. It is me, I said, watching my parents' silhouette in the window. Proceed with the plan. Buy the debt. Buy all of it. And Mr. Sterling? Yes. Add a clause to the eviction notice. What kind of clause? I watched Marcus walk past the window. His head hung low. The tenants are to be evicted, I said. But any guests who can prove they were coerced into financial abuse, they might get a pardon. I want to offer Marcus a way out. Understood, Mr. Sterling said. I will have the papers ready for the bank transfer by morning. I hung up and put the car in reverse. The tires crunched on the gravel as I backed out. Enjoy the cigar catalog, Dad, I whispered. Because pretty soon the only thing you will be smoking is the bridge you just burned. I returned to the house on Friday evening. I told myself it was to pick up some tax documents I had left in the safe. But really, I was looking for confirmation. After the incident with the $5,000 and Marcus handing me his secret stash, I needed to see how far the rot had spread. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew the dynamic had shifted again. The house was buzzing with energy. Not the anxious energy of people who were broke, but the manic energy of people who were spending money they did not have. My mother, Linda, was in the foyer directing two men in blue jumpsuits who looked like contractors. She was holding an architectural blueprint that looked like it had been printed off the internet. Her face was flushed with excitement. When she saw me, she didn't even frown. She smiled. A wide, terrifying smile that didn't reach her eyes. You are just in time, Audrey, she chirped. Come into the living room. We have news. Big news. I followed her. Jessica was sitting on the sofa surrounded by throw pillows. She was holding a glass of sparkling cider instead of her usual wine. My father was standing behind her, looking prouder than he had on the day I graduated with my master's degree. "Tell her, Jessica," my mother urged, clapping her hands. Jessica looked at me and placed a hand dramatically on her flat stomach. "We are pregnant," she announced. I stared at her. Just 3 days ago, she was drinking alcohol. Just 3 days ago, she was complaining about gaining 2 pounds. "Wow," I said, keeping my face neutral. "That was fast." "It is a miracle, really," Jessica said, batting her eyelashes. "We weren't even trying, but the universe just knew. It knew we were ready to expand the legacy. And because of this blessing, my father interrupted. Stepping forward, "We have to make some changes, immediate changes. A baby changes everything, Audrey. We need space. We need a proper environment for the heir to the family." The heir. They were talking about an unborn child like it was a prince in a medieval kingdom. Meanwhile, the actual owner of the kingdom was standing there, clutching her purse. "That is great," I said. "But what does that have to do with the contractors in the hall?" My mother stepped in, linking her arm with mine. "Well, sweetie, we can't put the baby in the guest room. It is too small, and the light is terrible. Jessica needs a suite, a nursery suite, with a connecting room for the night nurse." I felt a pit form in my stomach. I knew exactly where this was going. "We are taking the second floor," my father said. "The whole thing. We are going to knock down the wall between your old room and the guest room to create a master nursery." My room, the room I had grown up in. The room where I had studied for my CPA exams until my eyes burned. The room where I had hidden from their screaming matches. It was the only space in this house that still felt like mine. "You are knocking down my wall," I asked, "but my stuff is still in there. My books, my clothes, my desk." "Oh, we handled that," Jessica said, waving her hand. "We knew you were busy with the wedding and everything, so we did you a favor. We cleared it out." "You did what?" My voice rose an octave. I turned and ran up the stairs. My mother called after me, telling me to calm down, but I didn't listen. I took the steps 2 at a time. When I reached the top of the landing, the door to my bedroom was wide open. The room was unrecognizable. The pale yellow wallpaper I had chosen when I was 16 was already being stripped away by a workman. The carpet was covered in dust. But it was the emptiness that hit me hardest. My bed was gone. My bookshelf was gone. My desk was gone. The room was a hollow shell. "Where is it?" I asked the workman. "Where is my stuff?" He looked up startled. "The lady told us to bag it up. Said it was junk. We put it in the garage." I turned and ran back down the stairs, past my parents, who were now sipping champagne and discussing paint colors. I burst into the garage. The garage was cold and smelled of gasoline and mildew. In the center of the concrete floor sat a pile of black heavy-duty trash bags. They weren't stacked neatly. They were thrown into a heap. I walked over to the nearest bag and ripped it open. My clothes spilled out. My winter coats, my professional suits all crumpled and stained with dust. I opened another bag. It was my books, my college textbooks, my novels, my collection of vintage classics. The spines were bent, the covers torn. Then I saw it. Lying on the concrete floor, not even in a bag, was my framed diploma. Magna cum laude. It was face down. I picked it up. The glass was shattered. The frame was snapped in half. Someone had stepped on it. A footprint was clearly visible on the back of the mounting board. This wasn't just renovation. This was erasure. I dug deeper into the pile, frantically looking for one specific box. The box where I kept my journals. I had kept a diary every day since I was 12 years old. Those journals contained every secret, every tear, every moment of hope I had ever felt. They were the evidence of my life in this house. I couldn't find the box. I checked every bag. I moved the piles of clothes. It wasn't there. I felt a panic rising in my chest. I ran back into the house. My parents were still in the living room. "Where is the blue box?" I asked, breathless. "The plastic blue box that was under my bed." My father looked up. He looked annoyed that I was interrupting their celebration. "The blue box," he repeated. "Oh, the one with the old notebooks." "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "Where is it?" He shrugged. He pointed toward the fireplace. The living room had a massive stone fireplace. A fire was crackling merrily in the grate, giving the room a cozy, warm glow. I looked at the fire, and then I saw it. Curling in the flames was a spiral binding. I saw a page turning into ash. I could see my own handwriting for a split second before it turned black and crumbled. No! I screamed. I lunged toward the fireplace. I didn't care about the heat. I reached for the poker and tried to drag the burning mess out. Audrey, stop it! My mother yelled. You are getting soot on the rug. I managed to pull out one half-burnt notebook. It was smoking. The cover was melted. I stomped on it to put out the flame. I picked it up. It was from when I was 14. Most of the pages were gone. Why, I whispered. I turned to look at my father. He was standing there with a drink in his hand, looking completely unbothered. Why did you burn them? My father sighed as if explaining something to a toddler. We ran out of kindling, Audrey. And honestly, it was just clutter. Sentimental junk. You're 30 years old. Why do you need to keep diaries like a teenager? We are making room for the future. We can't be hoarding the past. Clutter. My memories were clutter. My pain was kindling. I looked at my mother. She was checking her phone, probably looking for nursery furniture. She didn't care. Jessica giggled from the couch. God, Audrey, don't be so dramatic. I read a few pages before Dad threw them in. You were so emo in high school, complaining about how nobody loved you. It was embarrassing. I did you a favor getting rid of them. She read them. She violated my privacy, laughed at my pain, and then watched my father burn it. I stood there holding the charred remains of my journal. My hands were covered in black soot. My dress was ruined. The smell of burning paper and melting plastic filled my nose. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of the final tether connecting me to these people breaking forever. For years, I had held on to the hope that they loved me deep down. I thought if I was just good enough, rich enough, successful enough, they would see me. But they didn't see me. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an ATM machine, and when I stopped dispensing cash, I was trash to be burned. I looked at the shattered diploma in the garage. I looked at the fire consuming my history. I stood up. I dusted the soot off my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't scream anymore. The time for screaming was over. I looked at my father. He was watching me, waiting for me to apologize for making a scene. I looked at my mother. She was waiting for me to offer to pay for the contractors. I looked at Jessica. She was waiting for me to congratulate her again. I smiled. It was a cold smile. A smile that didn't reach my eyes. A smile that belonged to a forensic accountant who had just found a smoking gun in a fraud case. You are right, Dad, I said. My voice was steady. Terrifyingly steady. It is just clutter. We need to make room for the future. My father nodded, satisfied that I had finally submitted. Exactly. I'm glad you see reason. Now, since you are here, you can help the guys carry the rest of the drywall up. I shook my head. No, Dad, I have to go. I have a lot of cleaning to do. Cleaning, my mother asked. At your apartment. Everywhere, I said. I looked around the room, memorizing every detail. The expensive curtains, the cigar humidor, the happy family that was built on my back. I am going to clean everything out. I am going to make sure everything is in its proper place. I walked to the door. Oh, and Jessica, I said, pausing with my hand on the knob. She looked up. What? Good luck with the nursery. I really hope the renovation is worth it. I walked out of the house. I walked past the garage where my life lay in trash bags. I didn't stop to pick anything up. I left the diploma. I left the clothes. I left it all. I didn't need those things anymore. I didn't need proofs of my achievement to know who I was. And I certainly didn't need their approval. I got into my car. My hands were black with soot. I gripped the steering wheel, leaving dark smudges on the leather. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Mr. Sterling. It is Audrey, I said. Is everything all right? He asked, sounding concerned. You sound different. I am fine, I said. I am better than fine. I am ready. Did they sign the loan papers? He asked. Not yet, I said, watching the house through the windshield. They are too busy renovating. They are knocking down walls, Mr. Sterling. They are destroying the property value. I heard the lawyer gasp. That is illegal. They cannot alter the structure without the owner's permission. I know, I said. Add it to the list. Destruction of property, vandalism, and emotional damages. I watched the smoke rising from the chimney. The smoke of my journals. Mr. Sterling, I said. Send the notice. Now, he asked. No, I said. Send it so it arrives on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. I want them to have one last night of hope, and then I want to burn their world down just like they burned my books. Understood, Audrey. Wednesday it is. I hung up. I took one last look at the house. It looked warm and inviting from the outside, but I knew the truth. It was a house of cards, and I had just pulled the bottom card. I drove away into the night. The soot on my hands felt like war paint. The girl who wanted to be loved was dead. She died in that fireplace. The woman who was driving away was the landlord, and she was coming back to collect. Saturday morning arrived with a deceptively calm sky over Connecticut. I knew my schedule perfectly because for 20 years I had been the one managing it. At 9 o'clock sharp, my father Richard would be teeing off at the country club, a habit he refused to break even when he was claiming poverty. My mother Linda would be at her weekly lymphatic drainage massage, a $300 treatment she claimed was medically necessary for her stress. Jessica and Marcus were at a brunch in the city. The house was empty. I parked my car 2 streets away just in case a neighbor was watching. I walked to the back of the property, slipping through the gap in the hedge I used to use as a teenager. The house loomed above me, silent and white. I didn't need a key. I knew that the lock on the mudroom door had been sticky for 5 years, and if you jiggled the handle just right, it popped open. My father had never fixed it because fixing things cost money, and he preferred spending money on things people could see. I stepped inside. The house smelled of lemon polish and impending disaster. I moved quickly through the kitchen, avoiding the urge to look at the spot where I had written that $15,000 check. I wasn't here to reminisce. I was here to work. I headed straight for my father's study. He called it the library. It was a room lined with dark mahogany bookshelves, filled with leather-bound books he had never read. In the center of the room sat his massive oak desk, a throne for a king with no kingdom. Behind the desk was his computer, a top-of-the-line iMac. I sat down in his leather chair. It was still warm from where he had sat earlier, checking the weather for his golf game. I woke the screen. A password prompt appeared. I stared at the blinking cursor. Most people think hacking is complicated code and matrix screens. In reality, it is usually just knowing the person. My father was a narcissist. He wouldn't choose a random string of numbers. He would choose something that reflected how he saw himself. I tried typing Richard 1. Incorrect. I tried wealth. Incorrect. I tried Greenwich. Incorrect. I paused and thought about what mattered most to him. It wasn't money because he lost that. It wasn't me. It was the image of success. It was the golden child who validated that image. I typed Jessica wins. The screen unlocked. I felt a surge of nausea, but I pushed it down. I was in forensic mode now. I pulled a high-speed flash drive from my pocket and plugged it into the back of the monitor. I wasn't just going to look. I was going to clone everything. I started with the banking apps. My father had saved his passwords in the browser because he was too lazy to remember them. A fatal security flaw. I opened his main checking account. The balance was $300. I checked the savings account. $42. This was a man who drove a Jaguar and belonged to a club with a $50,000 initiation fee. He was living on fumes, but I knew that already. I was looking for the big numbers. I was looking for the equity. I opened the folder labeled House Documents, and there it was. A PDF file dated 6 months ago. Home equity line of credit approval. I clicked it open. My breath caught in my throat. They had taken out a second mortgage on the house. A massive line of credit for $500,000. But how? The house was in the trust. They couldn't borrow against it without the deed. I scrolled down to the signature page, and there it was again. My signature. Or rather, a very skilled forgery of my signature, authorizing the loan as the beneficiary. They had committed bank fraud. Federal bank fraud. They had used my name to steal $500,000 of equity out of the property. But where did the money go? You don't just spend $500,000 on dinners and shoes in 6 months. Even they weren't that reckless. I minimized the bank window and opened his email. I searched for keywords: investment, opportunity, returns. I found an email thread from a man named CryptoKing_88. The subject line read, "To the moon." I began to read. It was a classic pig butchering scam. A romance and investment scam wrapped into one. This person had convinced my father that he was an investment genius. They had promised him a 300% return in 2 months if he invested in a new cryptocurrency token called Legacy Coin. I opened the transaction history attached to the email. Date, June 4th, wire transfer $100,000. Date, July 12th, wire transfer $200,000. Date, August 1st, wire transfer $200,000. My father had taken the entire loan, the entire equity of the house, and wired it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I checked the current value of legacy coin. I opened a new tab and searched the ticker symbol. The chart looked like a cliff. The value had crashed to zero 3 weeks ago. The exchange had been shut down by the SEC. The founder was a fugitive. My father hadn't just spent the money, he had incinerated it. He had bet the house literally and lost. But that wasn't the worst part. I found a folder marked urgent. Inside was a scanned letter from the bank. The header was in bold red letters. Notice of default. They hadn't paid the mortgage on the loan for 3 months. The letter was brutal. Unless the sum of $18,000 in back payments is received by November 30th, foreclosure proceedings will commence immediately. November 30th. That was in 10 days. That was why they were desperate for my $15,000 at the engagement party. They weren't trying to pay the caterer. They were trying to stop the bank from taking the house before the wedding. My check had bought them maybe 2 weeks of silence, but $18,000 was just the back payment. The principal of $500,000 was gone. When the bank found out the collateral was fraudulent and the money was lost, they wouldn't just take the house. They would send my parents to federal prison. I sat back in the chair. The silence of the house felt heavy. I was sitting in the middle of a crime scene. Then I saw one more document on the desktop. It was a Word document. It was titled, The Doctor Plan. I opened it. It was a draft of a letter my father was writing to Marcus. I started reading, and my blood turned to ice. Dear Marcus, as you know, I have always seen you as a son. I want to bring you in on a family opportunity. I have a private real estate development deal that is about to close. It requires a short-term bridge capital of $200,000. The returns are guaranteed. Since Audrey is leaving us and she has become so difficult about money, I wanted to offer this to you first. This is how we secure the future for Jessica and the baby. I can put the loan in your name to help your credit score, but I will handle the payments. I covered my mouth with my hand. They were going to do it again. They had lost the house. They had lost the money. And now, like drowning rats, they were trying to climb onto Marcus to stay afloat. They were going to trick him into taking out a $200,000 loan, probably against his medical practice or his own future earnings. They would take that money, use it to pay off the immediate threats, and then lose the rest. They were going to destroy Marcus. They were going to destroy his career. And Jessica knew. She had to know. The text in the document had edits in pink. Make it sound more exclusive, Dad. Tell him it's for the baby. That was Jessica's voice. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated fury. Marcus was the only innocent person in this equation. He was a good man who worked hard saving lives, and he was married to a viper's nest. I pulled the flash drive out of the computer. I had seen enough. I had the bank fraud. I had the forgery. I had the foreclosure notice. And I had the conspiracy to defraud Marcus. I stood up. I wiped the desk down with my sleeve to remove any fingerprints. I pushed the chair back to exactly the position it was in. I walked out of the library. I walked into the kitchen. I saw the refrigerator where my mother posted her affirmations. Manifest abundance. Live your truth. I wanted to rip them down, but I didn't. I walked out the back door. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I plugged the flash drive into my own laptop. I uploaded everything to the cloud. Then I emailed a copy to Mr. Sterling. I picked up my phone and dialed the lawyer. Mr. Sterling, I said. My voice was calm, dangerously calm. I have the documents. It is worse than we thought. They are insolvent. The house is 30 days away from foreclosure. And they are about to scam Marcus for $200,000. I heard Mr. Sterling shuffling papers on the other end. We need to move fast, Audrey. If the bank forecloses before we serve the eviction, we'll lose leverage. No, I said. We are right on schedule. Here is the plan. You are going to call the bank on Monday. You are going to tell them that Justice Served LLC has acquired the debt. You are going to pay off the arrears, the $18,000, to stop the foreclosure clock. You are going to pay it? Mr. Sterling asked, surprised. Yes, I said. I am buying the debt, remember? I want to be the one holding the axe. But do not tell the bank who owns the LLC. Just tell them the debt is sold. And then prepare the final document, the one for Thanksgiving dinner. I looked at the house one last time. They thought they were the masters of the universe, playing golf and getting massages while their world burned. They thought they could just find another victim to throw into the fire. Not this time. I started the car. "I am coming for you, Dad," I whispered. "And I am bringing the receipts." I drove away. The sun was shining brighter now. It was a beautiful day for a reckoning. The audit was complete. The evidence was secured. The only thing left to do was serve the verdict, and I knew exactly when to do it. Thanksgiving, a time for family, a time for gratitude, and this year it would be a time for justice. The invitation arrived via a group text message on Sunday morning. It was from my mother. "Family dinner tonight at 6 p.m. Roast beef and Yorkshire pudding. Mandatory attendance. We have exciting updates about the house renovation." I looked at the message and felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Roast beef was my father's favorite meal. It was the meal we ate when I graduated college. It was the meal we ate when my father announced he was running for the club board. In the Carver household, roast beef meant theater. It meant we were about to perform the ritual of the happy, successful family, even if the walls were crumbling around us. I showed the message to Liam. He was sitting at our kitchen island drinking coffee. He read it and frowned. "Do we have to go?" he asked. "We know they are broke. We know they are lying. Why play along?" Because I said, buttoning my blazer, "I need to see their next move." I found the draft letter to Marcus on Dad's computer, but I need to see them try to execute the con in person. I need to witness the pitch. If I am going to destroy them, I need to be absolutely certain there is no misunderstanding. Plus, I added checking my phone connection. I have a little surprise prepared just in case things get out of hand. We arrived at the Greenwich house at 5:55. The driveway was swept clean. The porch lights were on. Inside, the house smelled of rosemary and garlic and expensive red wine. It was a sensory illusion designed to make you feel safe and comfortable. My mother Linda greeted us at the door wearing a silk apron over her dress. She hugged me. It was a stiff performance hug. "I am so glad you came, Audrey," she whispered. "Tonight is important. Be nice." I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the Wedgwood plates with the gold rim, the crystal goblets. My father sat at the head of the table polishing a wine glass with a cloth. Jessica and Marcus were already seated. Jessica looked radiant and smug. Marcus looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he was nursing a glass of whiskey like it was medicine. I took my seat next to Liam. I placed my phone on the table face down right next to my fork. The dining room had a large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, which my father usually used to watch golf. Tonight, however, it was connected to a laptop at the end of the table. A screensaver of a tropical beach was bouncing around the screen. My phone was quietly synced to that screen via Bluetooth, but nobody knew that yet. One tap of my finger, and I could override their presentation with the documents I had stolen. I could show the bank fraud. I could show the foreclosure notice, but I wasn't going to pull the trigger. Not yet. I wanted to see how low they would stoop. Dinner began with forced pleasantries. My father poured the wine. It was a vintage Bordeaux. I knew for a fact he couldn't afford it, which meant he had probably raided the cellar before selling off the rest of the collection. "So, Liam?" My father boomed his voice too loud for the room. "How is the wine business? I hear the market is volatile." "It is steady," Liam replied calmly. "We focus on quality, not speculation." My father laughed, a dismissive bark. "Speculation is where the money is, son. You have to risk big to win big." That is the Carver motto. I took a sip of water. Risk big. Like betting your house on a fake cryptocurrency. My mother brought out the roast. She carved it with theatrical precision. She piled extra meat onto Marcus's plate. "Eat up, Marcus," she cooed. "You work so hard. You need your strength. A growing family needs a strong patriarch." Marcus smiled weakly. "Thank you, Linda. It looks delicious." The conversation drifted to the baby. Jessica spent 20 minutes talking about names. She wanted something royal, something that sounded expensive. "We are thinking of Kensington," she said. "Or maybe Sterling." I almost choked on my potato. Sterling was the name of the lawyer who was currently drafting their eviction notice. The irony was suffocating. After the plates were cleared, my father stood up. He tapped his glass with a spoon just like he had at my engagement party. "Family," he began. "I wanted to bring everyone together tonight because we are entering a new chapter. A chapter of growth. a chapter of legacy. He gestured to the TV screen. He clicked a remote, and the tropical beach disappeared, replaced by a 3D rendering of a house. It was our house, but modified. The roof was raised. There were balconies added. It looked like a palace. As you know, Jessica and Marcus are giving us the gift of a grandchild, he said. And Linda and I have decided that this house, this historic estate, should be the cradle for that child. We are going to renovate the entire upper wing. A nursery, a playroom, a private suite for Marcus and Jessica so they can have support while raising the baby. He clicked to the next slide. It showed a nursery with chandeliers and marble floors. It was ridiculous. It was a fantasy. But my father continued, his voice dropping to a serious whisper, quality costs money. And right now, as you all know, the market is in a correction. My assets are tied up in long-term high-yield bonds. I cannot liquidate them without a penalty. It would be poor financial management to touch the principal. I watched Marcus. He was staring at his wineglass. He knew where this was going. He shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. However, my father said, turning his gaze directly onto Marcus, there is a solution. A way to keep the wealth in the family. My father walked around the table and put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. He squeezed it, a gesture of dominance disguised as affection. Marcus, son, you are a doctor. You have a prime credit rating. We found a specialized construction loan. It is exclusive to medical professionals. The interest rate is negligible. He placed a glossy brochure on the table in front of Marcus. We want to partner with you, Dad said. You signed for the bridge loan, just $200,000. It covers the materials. I will handle the monthly payments for my dividends. We build the suite. The property value skyrockets. And in 6 months, when my bonds mature, I pay off the loan in full. I watched Marcus pick up the brochure. His hands were shaking slightly. Richard, he said, his voice tight. I don't know. I still have $300,000 in medical school loans, and we just bought the new car for Jessica. My debt-to-income ratio is already high. My mother let out a soft gasp. She covered her mouth with her napkin. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Oh, Marcus, she sobbed softly. Are you saying no to us? Are you saying no to the baby? I am not saying no, Linda Marcus stammered. I'm just saying $200,000 is a lot of money. If something happens, if you miss a payment, it falls on me. I could lose my license if I go bankrupt. My father looked offended. He pulled his hand away. Miss a payment, he repeated, as if the idea was absurd. Marcus, look around you. Look at this house. Look at this dinner. Do you think I am the kind of man who misses payments? I am trying to give you an opportunity. I am trying to let you buy into the legacy. Most sons-in-law would kill for this chance. Jessica jumped in. She grabbed Marcus's hand. Babe, please. Do you want our baby to sleep in a small room? Do you want us to be cramped in that apartment in the city? Mom and Dad are offering us a mansion. All you have to do is sign a paper. They pay for everything. Why do you have to be so difficult? I felt the anger rising in my throat. It was a coordinated attack. They were cornering him. They were using his love for his wife and his unborn child as a weapon to destroy his financial future. They knew they couldn't pay that loan. They knew the house was about to be foreclosed on. They were going to let Marcus take the debt, and when the bank seized the house, Marcus would be left holding a $200,000 bag of air. I looked at my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I had the file ready. Foreclosure_notice.pdf. I could cast it to the TV right now. I could replace that stupid 3D nursery with the letter from the bank demanding $18,000. I could end this charade in 5 seconds. I looked at Liam. He was watching me. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. Not yet. He was right. If I exposed them now, Marcus would be humiliated in front of everyone. He would feel foolish. Jessica would scream. My parents would deny it and claim the document was fake or a mistake. It would be a messy shouting match. No. I needed Marcus to see the truth with his own eyes away from their influence. I needed to save him without destroying his dignity. I took my hand off the phone. I picked up my wine glass instead. Dad, I said, speaking for the first time. Can I see the brochure? My father looked at me suspiciously, but he slid the brochure across the table. I flipped through it. It was a predatory lending scheme, variable interest rate, balloon payment at the end. It was financial suicide. Wow, I said, keeping my voice flat. This is quite a deal. 8% interest. That is higher than a standard mortgage. My father snatched the brochure back. It is the best rate available for this kind of capital. You are an accountant, Audrey, but you don't understand real estate development. Stick to your spreadsheets. He turned back to Marcus. Marcus, we need an answer. The contractors are ready to start on Monday. We need the deposit. If you don't sign, we lose the crew. And the nursery won't be ready when the baby comes. My mother started crying harder. Her shoulders were shaking. I just want my grandbaby to have a home, she wailed. Is that too much to ask? Marcus looked at Jessica. She was giving him the puppy dog eyes. He looked at Linda crying into her napkin. He looked at Richard standing over him like a tower of authority. He was crumbling. I could see it. He was a good man who wanted to make people happy. He didn't know how to fight sociopaths. Okay, Marcus said quietly. I will look at the papers. If the terms are okay, I will sign on Monday. My father clapped his hands together. Excellent. That is the spirit. That is the leadership I knew you had in you. My mother stopped crying instantly. She beamed. Oh, Marcus, thank you. You are truly part of the family now. Jessica kissed his cheek. You are the best daddy ever. My stomach churned. They had him. They had hooked him. I stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. Excuse me, I said. I need to use the restroom. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't go to the restroom. I went to the kitchen to get my purse. I needed to get out of there. But more importantly, I needed to get Marcus alone. I waited in the hallway until I heard the chairs scraping. Dinner was breaking up. My father was inviting Marcus to the study to smoke a celebratory cigar. I intercepted Marcus as he was walking toward the study. Marcus, I whispered, grabbing his arm. He jumped. Oh, hey, Audrey, listen to me, I said, my voice low and urgent. Do not sign anything tonight. Do not sign anything tomorrow morning. He frowned. Audrey, please, don't start. Your dad explained it. It is just a bridge loan. It is not a bridge loan, Marcus, I hissed. It is an anchor. Jessica appeared at the end of the hall. Audrey, what are you doing? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Leave him alone. Stop trying to ruin our moment just because you are jealous. I stepped back. I put my hands up. I am not jealous, Jessica. I just want Marcus to read the fine print. I am a doctor, Audrey. Marcus said, his voice cold. I know how to read. He pulled away from me and walked into the study with my father. The door clicked shut. I stood there in the hallway. Jessica smirked at me and walked back to the dining room to finish the wine. I walked out to the car where Liam was waiting. Did they get him? Liam asked. They think they did. I said, buckling my seatbelt. They think he's going to sign on Monday. So what do we do? Liam asked. Do we show him the proof? Yes, I said, staring at the dark windows of the house. But not here. Not with them breathing down his neck. I pulled out my phone. I sent a text to Marcus. Meet me at the coffee shop near the hospital tomorrow at 6 a.m. before your shift. Alone. If you don't come, you will lose your medical license. I am not joking. I watched the message status change to delivered. Then read. He would come. Fear is a powerful motivator. Let's go, Liam, I said. The dinner was fake. The renovation is fake. But the bankruptcy I am about to hand them, that is going to be very real. We drove away, leaving the happy family to celebrate their latest victim. They were toasting with expensive wine in a house they didn't own, spending money they had just stolen from a man who trusted them. They thought they had won the chess match. They didn't realize that I had already captured their king. Tomorrow, I would save the night. And then at Thanksgiving, I would flip the whole board. The coffee shop across from the hospital was sterile and smelled of burnt espresso and antiseptic. It was 6 in the morning. The sun had not yet risen over the city skyline. The only people in the shop were exhausted nurses ending their shifts and anxious relatives waiting for surgery updates. It was the perfect place to deliver bad news because nobody here had the energy to make a scene. I sat at a small metal table in the back corner. In front of me sat a manila envelope. Inside were the printed copies of the forensic audit I had conducted on my father's computer. I checked my watch, 6:05. The door chimed. Marcus walked in. He looked terrible. He was wearing his blue scrubs and a fleece vest. His eyes were red-rimmed and he held his car keys tight in his hand like a weapon. He spotted me and walked over. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He pulled out the metal chair opposite me and sat down heavily. Make it fast, Audrey, he said, his voice rough with lack of sleep. I have rounds in 30 minutes, And if Jessica finds out I am meeting you, she's going to lose her mind. She told me last night that you are just jealous of our happiness. She said you are trying to sabotage the renovation because you can't stand seeing us succeed. I looked at him. I looked at the good man who was being gaslit by my entire family. Do you believe that, Marcus? I asked calmly. Do you really believe I would drive into the city at 6 in the morning just to be petty? Marcus rubbed his face with his hands. I don't know what to believe, Audrey, but they are offering us a home, a legacy, and you are offering me cryptic text messages and drama. Just tell me what this is about so I can go. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend my character. I simply slid the manila envelope across the table. Open it, I said. Marcus stared at the envelope. What is this? Just read it. Start with the page marked with the red sticky note. He sighed annoyed, but he opened the flap. He pulled out the stack of papers. He found the page with the red tab. It was the bank statement from my father's secret account, the one showing the wire transfers to the crypto scam. What am I looking at? Marcus asked, squinting at the numbers. Look at the dates, I said. June, July, August, $500,000 wired to an offshore exchange called Legacy Coin. Okay, Marcus said, shrugging. So Richard made some investments. He told me his money is tied up in bonds. I leaned forward. It is not tied up, Marcus. It is gone. Legacy Coin was a Ponzi scheme. It collapsed 3 weeks ago. The SEC shut it down. Your father-in-law didn't invest that money. He incinerated it. That $500,000 was the equity in the house. Marcus froze. He looked up at me. Wait, what do you mean, equity? Turn the page, I said. He flipped the page. It was the notice of default from the bank. The foreclosure warning. I watched his eyes scan the document. I watched the color drain from his face. I saw the moment the reality hit him. They haven't paid the mortgage in 3 months. I explained, my voice clinical and precise. The bank is moving to foreclose on November 30th. That is in 2 weeks. Marcus dropped the paper. His hand was shaking. But Richard said, he said the house was debt-free. He said the loan was just for the renovation. There is no renovation, Marcus, I said brutally. There never was. The blueprints are fake. The contractors are actors. They don't need $200,000 to build a nursery. They need $200,000 to pay the bank so they don't get kicked out on the street. They are using you to plug the hole in the Titanic. Marcus shook his head. No, that can't be right. Linda was crying. She was talking about her grandbaby. They wouldn't do that to their own family. They would, I said. And they are. If you sign that loan document on Monday, you are not buying a nursery suite. You're handing cash to a drowning man. And when the bank takes the house anyway because 200 grand isn't enough to cover the principal, do you know what happens to you? Marcus stared at me, his mouth slightly open. I pointed at the papers. You will be left with an unsecured loan of $200,000 and no asset to back it. You will default. And do you know what happens to a surgeon with a bankruptcy on his record? Marcus swallowed hard. I could lose my hospital privileges. Exactly, I said. Most hospitals have a morality clause and a financial stability requirement. If you are desperate for money, you are a liability. You are a risk for insurance fraud or theft of drugs. They will suspend your license pending an investigation. You won't just lose your credit score, Marcus. You will lose your career. You will lose the ability to feed your child. Marcus slumped back in his chair. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He looked at the foreclosure notice again, as if hoping the words would change. I can't believe it, he whispered. They looked me in the eye. Richard shook my hand. He called me son. He needed a co-signer, I said. That is all you are to him. A credit score with a pulse. Marcus covered his eyes. This is a nightmare. I have to tell Jessica. She doesn't know. If she knew they were broke, she would never have agreed to this. She thinks we are building a palace. I stayed silent. This was the hardest part. I had to break his heart twice. Marcus looked at me pleadingly. Jessica is a victim too, right? They are lying to her too. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second smaller document. It was a credit card statement, but not my father's. When I was in the system, I checked the authorized user accounts, I said softly. Jessica is an authorized user on one of the hidden cards. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? You said you guys were saving money, I said. You said Jessica told you she was being thrifty, that she was putting your extra income into a savings account for the baby. Yes, Marcus said, defensive again. She puts $3,000 a month into the high-yield savings. I see the transfers leave my checking account. I slid the paper across the table. The transfers leave your checking account, Marcus, but they don't go to savings. They go to pay off this Amex card. Marcus picked up the statement. He scanned the charges. Sephora, $500. Nordstrom Personal Shopper, $1,200. The Ritz-Carlton Spa, $800. Baby Dior, $600 for a pair of infant shoes. The dates match the transfers exactly. She isn't saving for the baby, Marcus, I said gently. She is spending it on herself. She's buying an image. She's just like her parents. She needs to look rich more than she needs to be safe. Marcus stared at the list. He pulled out his phone. He opened his banking app. He tapped on the transfer history. Then he opened a calculator. I watched him do the math. I watched him realize that the $30,000 he thought he had saved for his child simply did not exist. He put the phone down on the table face down. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just went very, very still. It was the stillness of a man who realizes his entire life is a lie. She bought baby shoes, he whispered. $600 for shoes, and I'm here picking up extra shifts in the ER because I thought we needed the money for diapers. He looked up at me. His eyes were dry now. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They are all in on it, aren't they? Jessica knows they are broke. She might not know about the foreclosure, I said, but she knows they are desperate. And she doesn't care. As long as she gets her nursery and her photos for Instagram, she doesn't care who pays the bill, even if it costs you your license. Marcus clenched his jaw. He picked up the manila envelope. He folded the papers neatly and put them inside. So what do we do? He asked. His voice was different now. It sounded like a doctor in the trauma room, focused, deadly. Do I go confront them? Do I drive to the house right now and throw these papers in Richard's face? No, I said. If you confront them now, they will gaslight you. They will cry. They will say it is a mistake. They will guilt trip you. And Jessica, she will turn it around on you. She will say you don't trust her. She will weaponize the pregnancy. Marcus nodded slowly. You are right. That is exactly what she does. We wait, I said. We wait until Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, he asked. That is in 3 days. Yes, I said. Thursday, the day before the foreclosure deadline. I leaned across the table. Here is the plan, Marcus. You are going to go home. You are going to smile. You are going to tell them that you are reviewing the loan documents with your lawyer and it is taking a few days. Stall them. I can do that, Marcus said. And then I continued on. Thanksgiving, we are all going to sit down for dinner. And when Richard makes his toast, when he tries to seal the deal, we are going to expose everything. Not just to them, but to everyone. I have a way to make sure they can never lie their way out of this again. Marcus looked at the envelope in his hand. Until he looked at the phone where his wife's betrayal was hiding. He stood up. He looked taller than he did when he walked in. Thank you, Audrey, he said. You saved my life today. Literally. I stood up too. We are the only sane ones left, Marcus. We have to stick together. He nodded. He reached out and shook my hand. It wasn't a family handshake. It was a business deal. I will see you on Thursday, he said. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop. He didn't look back. He walked toward the hospital, toward his job, toward the life he was going to fight for. I sat back down and finished my cold coffee. I had saved the hostage. Now it was time to prepare the execution. I pulled out my phone and texted Mr. Sterling. The alliance is secured. Proceed with the debt purchase. We own them. Mr. Sterling replied immediately. Done. The eviction notice is printed. Happy Thanksgiving, Audrey. I smiled. It was going to be a very happy Thanksgiving indeed. Monday morning arrived with a cold rain that battered the windows of Mr. Sterling's office. It was fitting weather for what we were about to do. Inside the conference room, the air was still and smelled of coffee and toner ink. On the mahogany table sat a single black telephone. It was set to speaker mode. We were waiting for the vice president of distressed assets at the regional bank. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. To anyone looking in, I appeared calm. I was wearing my best charcoal suit, my hair pulled back in a severe bun. But under the table, my heel was tapping a frantic rhythm against the floor. This was the biggest transaction of my life. I wasn't buying a house. I wasn't buying a car. I was buying my freedom. I was buying the weapon that would finally cut the cord. Mr. Sterling looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Are you sure about this, Audrey? He asked quietly. Once we execute this transfer, there is no going back. You will be the legal owner of the debt. If the property value has dropped, you could lose money on this. From a purely financial standpoint, it is a high-risk move. I looked at the lawyer. He was thinking like an investor. He didn't understand that the return on investment here wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in justice. I am sure I said. My voice did not waver. The money in my account is just numbers, Mr. Sterling. It is safe. It is boring. But this debt is leverage. And I need leverage more than I need safety. The phone buzzed. Mr. Sterling pressed the button. Good morning, this is James Form, the bank's Asset Recovery Division. Am I speaking with the representative of Justice Served, LLC? Yes, Mr. Sterling said, his voice dropping into his professional baritone. I am Arthur Sterling, representing the LLC. We have reviewed the file for the Carver property. My client is prepared to purchase the non-performing note in full, including all arrears and penalties. We are ready to wire the funds immediately, provided the assignment of mortgage is recorded today. I held my breath. This was it. The bank didn't care who paid the debt. They just wanted to get a toxic asset off their books before the quarter ended. To them, my parents were just a bad statistic. To me, they were the target. Excellent, James said, sounding relieved. The total payoff amount is $518,000.42. That includes the principal, the unpaid interest, and the legal fees for the foreclosure initiation. $518,000. It was almost everything I had. It was my savings, my retirement fund, and the inheritance I had managed to salvage. I was emptying my war chest. Send the wire, I whispered to Mr. Sterling. He nodded. He typed a command into his laptop. He turned the screen toward me so I could see the confirmation window. Transfer initiated. $518,018.42 to First National Bank. I watched the progress bar. It moved slowly. 20%, 50%, 80%. Transaction complete. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. Thank you, James, Mr. Sterling said into the phone. Please send the assignment documents to my office immediately. And please confirm that the bank will cease all direct communication with the borrowers. Justice served. LLC will handle all future correspondence. Confirmed, James said. The borrowers are yours. Good luck collecting. Mr. Sterling hung up the phone. He looked at me. Congratulations, Audrey. You are now the mortgagee. You own the debt. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the rainy streets of Manhattan. Somewhere out there in Greenwich, my father was probably drinking his third coffee of the morning, blissfully unaware that the ground beneath his feet had just been sold to his daughter. He thinks he's living in his house, I said softly. He thinks he is the king of his castle. He doesn't know the locks have already been changed. So what is the next step, Mr. Sterling asked. Do we send the eviction notice now? I turned back to him. Yes, but it has to be precise. It has to be terrifying. I sat down and pulled out the draft we had worked on. It was a formal legal notice printed on heavy bonded paper. The header read, Justice Served, LLC. It was aggressive. It was faceless. It was designed to intimidate. The letter stated clearly that the mortgage had been sold to a private investment firm. It stated that due to the default status of the loan, the new owner was exercising their right to accelerate the debt. This meant the entire amount, $500,000, was due immediately, not in monthly installments. All of it. Now, if the full amount was not received within 48 hours, eviction proceedings would begin. Send it via courier, I said. I want a signature required. I want them to have to look a stranger in the eye and sign for their own destruction. Mr. Sterling called the courier service. Within an hour, the letter was on its way. I went back to work, but I couldn't focus. I sat at my desk staring at my spreadsheets, but seeing only the front door of my childhood home. I checked the tracking number of the courier every 5 minutes. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the status changed. Delivered. Signed by Linda Carver. The bomb had detonated. Now I just had to wait for the shockwave. I didn't have to wait long. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to let them sweat. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the fear in her voice. I needed to know if they would tell the truth or if they would lie until the bitter end. I took a deep breath. I put on my best concerned daughter voice. Hello, Mum. Audrey. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "You need to come home. You need to bring money. It is your father." I frowned. This wasn't what I expected. I expected her to be screaming about a letter, about a company called Justice Served. "What about Dad?" I asked. "Is he okay?" "He is sick," she sobbed. "He collapsed. We are at the house, but we need to go to the specialist. It is his heart, Audrey. The doctor says he needs emergency surgery. It is a valve replacement. The insurance won't cover it because it is experimental. We need money immediately." I closed my eyes. Of course, the cancer scare, the heart attack, the sudden medical emergency. It was the oldest trick in the narcissist handbook. When they are cornered financially, they create a health crisis to bypass your logic and appeal to your guilt. "How much, Mom?" I asked calmly. "How much is the surgery?" $500,000, she blurted out. I almost laughed out loud. It was the exact amount of the debt. They weren't even trying to be creative. They got the letter, they saw the number, and they invented a surgery with the exact same price tag. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that sounds incredibly expensive. Have you tried a different hospital? Marcus is a doctor. Have you called him? Maybe he can get you a discount." "No," she screamed. "Don't call Marcus. We don't want to worry him. He has enough on his plate. This is a family matter, Audrey. You're the only one who can help. You work in finance. You have savings. You have that fiancé with the wine money. You have to help us. Your father could die." I leaned back in my chair. The audacity was breathtaking. They had just received a letter saying they were losing their home. Instead of calling me and telling me the truth, instead of admitting they had gambled away the house and asking for help to save it, they decided to fake a heart attack. They thought I was stupid enough to wire $500,000 for a fake surgery, which they would then use to pay off the Justice Served LLC. They were trying to use my money to pay me back without me knowing it. "Mom," I said slowly, "I am looking at my accounts right now. I don't have $500,000 cash. Nobody does." "You do," she insisted. "You must. You have been working for 10 years. You are stingy. You never buy anything. You must have it. Or ask Liam. Tell him it is life or death. Tell him he is saving his father-in-law." I looked at the tracking confirmation on my computer screen. Signed by Linda Carver at 2:30 p.m. "Mom," I asked, "is Dad there? Can I speak to him?" He's too weak," she stammered. "He is lying down. He can barely breathe." Put the phone to his ear. I commanded, "I want to tell him I love him before anything happens." There was a rustling sound, a muffled whisper. I could hear my father's voice in the background. It didn't sound weak. It sounded angry. He was hissing instructions to her. "Tell her to wire it to the Cayman account. Tell her the hospital is offshore." I smiled. The Cayman account. The same account used for the crypto scam. They were panic spiraling. Finally, my father's voice came on the line. He made a show of wheezing. "Audrey!" He gasped. "Cough, cough. I don't have much time. The pain, it is like an elephant on my chest. Dad!" I said, my voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I am so sorry. Listen to me," he rasped. "The doctors say, if I get the funds by 5 o'clock, they can operate. You have to save me, Audrey. I am your father. I gave you life. Now you have to give it back to me." I looked at the clock. It was 3:15. "Dad," I said, "I wish I could help. Truly. But I just made a huge investment this morning. My accounts are empty." What he roared. The wheezing vanished instantly. "What investment? What did you buy?" "I bought some distressed debt," I said casually. "A real estate portfolio. It took everything I had. I am literally broke, Dad. I can't even send you $5, let alone 500,000. There was a silence on the other end. A heavy, terrified silence. My father had just realized that his plan A had failed. He had played the cancer card and I had blocked it. You selfish little witch," he snarled. His voice was strong now, full of venom. "You spend your money on garbage investments while your father is dying. I hope you rot. I hope you never have children, so you never know the pain of having a child like you." I let his words wash over me. They used to hurt. They used to make me cry and apologize. But today, they just felt like confirmation. "Dad," I said, my voice cold now. "You sound much better. The wheezing is gone. It is a miracle." He sputtered. It comes and goes. The pain comes in waves. Just, just find the money, Audrey. Borrow it. Steal it. I don't care. If you don't send the money by 5 o'clock, do not bother coming to the funeral. And then he hung up. I sat there holding the phone. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. They were not sick. They were desperate. They had received a notice from a faceless company called Justice Served, and they were terrified. They knew they couldn't manipulate a corporation, so they tried to manipulate the one person they had been manipulating for 30 years. But the person they called didn't exist anymore. I dialed Mr. Sterling immediately. They just called, I said. Did they admit to the letter, he asked? No. They faked a heart attack. They asked for exactly $500,000 for emergency surgery. They wanted me to wire it to the Cayman account. Mr. Sterling sighed, a long, weary sigh. I have seen a lot of things in 40 years of law, Audrey, but that is a special kind of low. It gets better, I said. I told them I was broke. I told them I spent all my money buying debt. You told them Mr. Sterling sounded alarmed. Did you give it away? No, I said. I was vague. They have no idea it is their debt I bought. They just think I am useless to them now, which means they are going to move to Plan B. Plan B? Mr. Sterling asked. Marcus, I said. They are going to corner Marcus. They have 48 hours to pay Justice Served LLC. They know I am tapped out. The only person left with a credit score is Marcus. I looked at the calendar. Today was Monday. Thanksgiving was Thursday. The eviction deadline was Wednesday at midnight. Mr. Sterling, I said, send a follow-up email from the LLC. Tell them that due to the lack of payment response, the deadline is firm. Tell them that an inspector will be visiting the property on Thursday morning to assess the asset condition. Thursday morning, Mr. Sterling asked. Thanksgiving morning. Exactly, I said. I want the pressure to be unbearable. I want them to sit down at that Thanksgiving dinner thinking it is their last meal in that house. I want them to be sweating when they try to get Marcus to sign. Consider it done, Mr. Sterling said. I hung up the phone. I looked out at the rain again. My father had told me not to come to his funeral. He didn't realize that I wasn't coming to a funeral. I was coming to an execution, and I was the one pulling the switch. I packed up my bag. I felt lighter than I had in years. The heavy burden of their love, the conditional love that cost me thousands of dollars, was gone. I had bought it. I had paid the price. And now I owned it. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. A young woman was standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers, probably for a birthday or an anniversary. She smiled at me. Rough day, she asked, seeing my serious face. I looked at her and smiled. A real, genuine smile. Actually, I said, it was the most profitable day of my life. I walked out into the rain, letting it wash over me. I didn't open my umbrella. I wanted to feel everything. I wanted to feel the cold. I wanted to feel the reality. My parents were trapped. They were in a cage of their own making, locked by their own lies. And on Thursday, I was going to walk into that cage, not as their victim, but as their keeper. I hailed a cab. To the hospital, I told the driver I wasn't going to see a patient. I was going to see Marcus. I needed to make sure our alliance was strong. I needed to warn him that the storm was about to shift in his direction. Because when a narcissist is drowning, they don't swim. They climb on top of the nearest person to breathe. My father had tried to climb on me and slipped. Now he was reaching for Marcus. And I was going to make sure that when he reached out, all he grabbed was the anchor I had waiting for him. The game was rigged. The dice were loaded. And for the first time in the history of the Carver family, the house was not going to win. I was. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a biting wind that rattled the window panes of the Greenwich estate. To the casual observer driving past the house, looked like a postcard of American prosperity. There were pumpkins arranged on the front steps. A wreath made of dried autumn leaves hung on the door. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. Inside, the house smelled of roasted sage and caramelized onions and expensive perfume. It was a masterpiece of staging. My mother, Linda, had outdone herself. She had set the dining table with the antique silver cutlery that had belonged to my great-grandmother. The centerpiece was a sprawling arrangement of orchids and candles. Everything was designed to scream old money. Everything was designed to say we are stable, we are wealthy, and we are happy. But I knew better. I walked into the house holding Liam's hand, and I could practically smell the panic underneath the aroma of the turkey. My father, Richard, was wearing a cashmere sweater that cost $400, but I noticed the collar was slightly frayed. He was sweating despite the chill in the air. His eyes were darting around the room, manic and terrified. Every time a car drove past the house, he flinched. He was waiting. He was waiting for the inspector from Justice Served LLC to show up. He was waiting for the axe to fall. My mother rushed over to greet us. She kissed my cheek, but her lips were cold. "You are late, Audrey," she hissed in my ear while smiling for the room. "Did you bring the check? Did you change your mind about the surgery money?" I pulled away and looked her in the eye. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mum. You look lovely. And no, I told you, I am tapped out." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she plastered it back on. She turned to the other guests. "Audrey is here, everyone. Fashionably late as always." The living room was full. Jessica was lounging on the velvet sofa, rubbing her belly. Marcus was sitting next to her, looking pale and rigid, and across from them sat Marcus's parents, Dr. and Mrs. Reynolds. They were dignified people. Marcus's father was a retired chief of surgery, and his mother was on the board of the local museum. They were exactly the kind of people my parents desperate to impress. They were the audience for today's performance. I walked over to shake Dr. Reynolds' hand. "Good to see you again, sir," I said. He smiled warmly. "Good to see you, Audrey. Marcus tells us you have been very busy with work." "Oh, she's always busy," my father interrupted, booming from the bar cart. "Audrey is our little workaholic. She counts beans for a living, you know. Very stressful. Not like the creative work Jessica does." He poured a glass of scotch for Dr. Reynolds. His hand was shaking so badly the bottle clinked against the glass. "So Richard," Dr. Reynolds said, taking the drink, "Marcus tells us you are planning quite the renovation. A nursery suite. That is a very generous gift." My father puffed out his chest. "Well, you know how it is. Family comes first. We want the best for the grandchild. We are sparing no expense. Marble floors, custom lighting. We are even importing the crib from Italy." I caught Marcus's eye. He looked like he was about to vomit. He knew that the only thing being imported was a foreclosure lawsuit. We sat down for dinner at 4 o'clock. The turkey was carved with ceremonial precision. My mother played the perfect hostess, spooning cranberry sauce onto plates and asking Mrs. Reynolds about her charity gala. But the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My parents were on a timer. They knew they had until midnight before the eviction process supposedly began, according to the email from Justice Served LLC. They needed to secure Marcus's signature on the loan before dessert. Midway through the meal, my mother decided to launch her attack on me. It was a strategic move. She wanted to discredit me in front of the Reynolds family so that if I tried to warn them later, I would look like the bitter, jealous sister. "Audrey," my mother said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "I noticed you didn't bring a bottle of wine." Again, I put down my fork. "I didn't think it was necessary, Mum. You have so much in the cellar." My mother laughed a tinkling, cruel sound. "It is not about the necessity, dear. It is about the gesture. It is about etiquette. But I suppose we can't expect you to understand that. You have been so tight with money lately." She turned to Mrs. Reynolds. "Audrey is going through a phase. She is hoarding every penny. We asked her to contribute a small amount to a family emergency recently, and she claimed she was broke." Can you imagine? A forensic accountant who is broke. My father chimed in, his mouth full of stuffing. "It is selfishness, plain and simple. We raised her to be generous, but some apples fall far from the tree. She's probably saving up to buy a condo in Jersey or something equally pedestrian." Liam shifted in his seat, ready to defend me. I put a hand on his knee. "Let them talk. Let them dig the hole deeper." I smiled at Mrs. Reynolds, who looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Mrs. Reynolds," I said, kept my voice calm and pleasant, "I did spend all my money recently. I bought a debt portfolio. It was a very unique opportunity. I now own the liabilities of some very distressed assets." My father froze. He looked at me with narrowing eyes. He didn't know I had bought his debt, but the word distressed clearly triggered him. "Boring," my father grunted. "Let's talk about something exciting. Let's talk about the future." He stood up and tapped his glass. The sound rang out sharp and clear in the silent room. "I would like to propose a toast," he announced. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Dr. and Mrs. Reynolds. "To family, to new beginnings, and to partnerships. Today is a special day, not just because of the holiday, but because we are officially breaking ground on the nursery project on Monday. He reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. He placed it next to Marcus's plate. Marcus, son, I know we discussed the paperwork earlier. Since your parents are here to witness this joyous occasion, I thought we could make it official. If you sign the authorization now, we can pop the special champagne I have been saving. I watched Marcus. He looked at the folder. He looked at his parents, who were beaming at him, proud that their son was marrying into such a generous family. Go on, son, Dr. Reynolds said. It is a wonderful opportunity. Jessica squealed and clapped her hands. Sign it, Marcus, please, for the baby. My father uncapped a gold fountain pen and held it out to Marcus. His eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. Sign it. Save me. Save us. Marcus reached for the pen. His hand hovered over the paper. The room went silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Tick, tock, tick, tock. My father was holding his breath. My mother was clutching her pearls. Just then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a long, assertive press, followed by 3 sharp raps on the heavy wood. My father jumped so hard, he knocked over his wineglass. The red liquid spilled across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain spreading rapidly toward the center of the table. Who on earth is that? My mother shrieked. We aren't expecting anyone. I checked my watch. 4:30. Right on time. I will get it, I said, standing up. Sit down, Audrey, my father barked. You are a guest. I will get it. It is probably the caterer picking up the trays. He stood up, wiping the wine off his hands with a napkin. He looked terrified. He thought it was the inspector from the LLC. He thought he could bribe them or charm them at the door. He walked into the foyer. We all turned in our chairs to watch. My father opened the door. Standing on the porch was not a caterer. It wasn't an inspector in a suit. It was a uniformed sheriff, a large man with a badge gleaming on his chest and a gun on his hip. Beside him stood a woman in a grey coat holding a clipboard, a court-appointed process server. The wind blew into the house, extinguishing the candles on the table. Richard Carver, the sheriff asked. His voice was deep and carried into the dining room. My father stammered. Yes, that is me. Is there a problem, officer? The woman stepped forward. Richard and Linda Carver, she announced loudly. We are serving you with an immediate order of eviction and a writ of possession on behalf of the property owner, Justice Served LLC. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. What my father shouted, trying to block the doorway. This is a mistake. There is no eviction. I own this house. Get off my property. The sheriff stepped forward, forcing my father to back up into the hallway. Sir, this is a court order. The property has been foreclosed. The debt was accelerated and you failed to pay. The new owner has requested immediate possession due to evidence of asset destruction. Asset destruction, Dr. Reynolds asked, standing up. What is going on? My father turned around, his face purple with rage and humiliation. It is a scam. It is a mistake. Someone hacked the bank. He looked at me. He looked at Marcus. Marcus, tell them, he screamed. Tell them we are good for it. Tell them about the loan. The sheriff walked into the dining room. He looked at the fancy dinner. He looked at the guests. I'm sorry to interrupt your meal, folks, he said, but this house is now the legal property of Justice Served LLC. Mr. and Mrs. Carver, you have 20 minutes to gather your personal essentials and vacate the premises. The locks are being changed at 5 o'clock. Vacate, my mother wailed. On Thanksgiving. You can't do this. We have guests. We have a turkey. Ma'am, the sheriff said, keeping his voice level. You were given notice on Monday. You were given a 48-hour warning. You chose to ignore it. Now you have to leave. My father lunged toward the table, grabbing the leather folder, the loan document Marcus was supposed to sign. Marcus, sign it, he yelled. Sign it now. We can fix this. We just need the deposit. Sign the damn paper. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at his parents, who were staring at Richard in horror. He picked up the gold pen. My father's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. Yes, son. Yes. Do it. Marcus looked at the pen, and then he snapped it in half. Ink splattered onto his hands. No, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but it echoed in the silence. I am not signing anything, Richard, because I know you don't own this house, and I know you tried to steal $200,000 from me to pay off your gambling debts. My mother gasped. Marcus, how dare you? Audrey told me, Marcus said, pointing at me. All eyes turned to me. My father looked at me with pure hatred. You did this. You called the police. You ruined Thanksgiving. I stood up. I walked to the head of the table where my father usually sat. I picked up the wine bottle he had spilled. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving, Dad, I said. I just corrected the guest list. I looked at the sheriff. Officer, I said. I am the representative for Justice Served, LLC. My father's jaw dropped. My mother stopped crying and stared at me in shock. You, my father whispered. You are the LLC. I nodded. I bought your debt on Monday, Dad. I own the mortgage. I own the arrears. And I own this house. I reached into my purse and pulled out the deed. And since I am the owner, I am exercising my right to choose who stays for dinner. I looked at Marcus and his parents. You are welcome to stay. Liam is staying. I pointed at the door. But Richard and Linda, your reservation has been cancelled. Get out. The room was deadly silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside, waiting to welcome them into the cold. The facade was gone. The play was over, and the curtain had just fallen on their heads. The silence in the dining room was heavy enough to crush bones. The sheriff stood in the archway, blocking the only exit to the front door. His presence was a stark contrast to the crystal glasses and the silk napkins. He was the real world crashing into their fantasy. He stepped forward, his heavy boots thudding against the hardwood floor that my father claimed he had paid to refinish last year. The sheriff held out a document. It was thick-folded and stamped with the unmistakable seal of the state court. Richard Carver, he said, his voice devoid of any sympathy. This is a formal notice to vacate. You have exactly 24 hours to remove your personal effects from the premises. However, given the hostile behavior and the attempted fraud witnessed here tonight, the new owner has requested that you leave the property immediately for the night. You may return tomorrow between 8 a.m. and noon with a moving truck to collect your furniture under police supervision. My father snatched the paper from the sheriff's hand. He ripped it open, his eyes scanning the lines frantically. His face turned from red to a ghostly white and then back to a violent purple. This is insanity, he screamed, throwing the paper onto the table right into the bowl of cranberry sauce. 24 hours. I have lived here for 30 years. You cannot kick me out of my own house. I have rights, squatters' rights, ownership rights. He turned to point a shaking finger at the sheriff. I know the mayor. I play golf with the district attorney. You're making a mistake, officer. A career-ending mistake. I will sue you. I will sue this department. And I will sue this fake company Justice Served, LLC, for harassment and emotional distress. My mother, Linda, rushed to his side, clutching his arm. Richard, tell them. Tell them about the deed. Tell them it is in the trust. That is right, my father yelled, seizing on the lie. The house is in a trust. The Audrey Carver Trust. My mother left it to me to manage. I am the trustee. I am the only one with the authority to sell or mortgage this property. This document is a fraud because I never signed off on a sale. He looked around the room seeking validation. He looked at Dr. Reynolds. You see, Arthur, it is a clerical error or identity theft. Someone is trying to steal our legacy. Dr. Reynolds did not nod. He sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the table, watching my father with the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at a tumor. My father turned his rage toward me. And you, he spat. You are sitting there looking smug. You think this is funny. You hired this actor, didn't you? This is some sick joke to get back at us for the engagement party. I slowly pushed my chair back. The scraping sound echoed in the room. I stood up. I smoothed out the front of my dress. I didn't look at the sheriff. I didn't look at Liam. I looked directly at my father. It is not a joke, Dad, I said. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. And you are right about one thing. The house was in the Audrey Carver Trust. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to him. He flinched as if I was going to hit him, but you are wrong about who owns it. I reached into my bag and pulled out the original certified copy of my grandmother's will, which Mr. Sterling had given me. It was old. The paper was yellowed at the edges. Grandma Eleanor didn't leave the house to you, I said, holding the document up for the room to see. She knew you were a gambler. She knew you were reckless. She left the house to the trust with strict instructions that it would transfer to me fully and irrevocably on my 30th birthday. My mother gasped. That is a lie. She would never cut us out. I ignored her. My 30th birthday was last year, I continued. The title should have transferred then, but it didn't, because you forged a waiver. I pulled out the second document. The forgery. You signed my name, Dad. You signed a document saying I was mentally unstable so you could keep control of the assets. You stole a year of my life. You stole the maintenance fund. And then you stole the equity. My father opened his mouth to deny it, but I cut him off. You took out a $500,000 line of credit against a house you did not legally own. You committed bank fraud. And then you lost it all on a crypto scam. I turned to the sheriff. Officer, the reason he is claiming he's the owner is because he has been impersonating the owner for 12 months. But the bank caught on. They foreclosed. And on Monday, the bank sold the bad debt to a private investment firm. I took a step closer to my father. The firm is called Justice Served, LLC. My father looked at me, his eyes bulging. Who owns it? He whispered. Who is backing you? Is it Liam? I shook my head. I laughed a dry, humorless sound. You still don't get it, do you, Dad? You think I am just the little girl who pays your bills? You think I am not smart enough to play your game? I tapped my chest. I am Justice Served, LLC. It is my company. I used my savings. I used my retirement. I bought your debt. I own the mortgage you defaulted on. I own the arrears you didn't pay. I own the interest you ignored. I slammed the deed down on the table next to the cranberry sauce. I am the landlord, Richard, and you are the worst tenant I have ever had. The silence that followed was absolute. My father looked at the deed. He looked at me. He looked at the sheriff who was nodding in confirmation. No, he whispered. You wouldn't. We are your parents. Not anymore, I said. Parents protect their children. You fed on me. You drained me. And when I ran dry, you tried to feed on Marcus. I pointed at the shattered pen on the floor. You were going to let him sign a loan for $200,000 to build a nursery that you knew would be foreclosed on in 24 hours. You were going to let him go bankrupt just to buy yourself 2 more weeks of pretending to be rich. My mother let out a wail. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was a cry of a cornered animal. We did it for the family, she screamed. We did it to save the image. What will people think if we lose the house? I looked at her with pity. Pure cold pity. People will think you are exactly who you are, Mum. Thieves. I turned to Dr. and Mrs. Reynolds. They were standing up now. Mrs. Reynolds looked like she had smelled something rotting. She gathered her purse, clutching it tight to her body, as if she was afraid my parents might try to steal that too. Marcus, Dr. Reynolds, said, his voice shaking with suppressed anger. Get your coat. We are leaving. Mrs. Reynolds looked at my mother. I have never in my life witnessed such depravity, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut deeper than any scream. To steal from your own daughter. To try to ruin your own son-in-law. You are monsters. Do not ever contact our family again. My mother reached out. Helen, please. You don't understand. It is a misunderstanding. We can explain. Mrs. Reynolds recoiled. Don't touch me. She turned and walked out the front door past the sheriff without looking back. Dr. Reynolds followed her, pausing only to put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Do the right thing, son, he said. Marcus was standing by the window. He hadn't moved since he broke the pen. He was staring at Jessica. Jessica was sitting on the sofa crying, but even her crying felt fake. She was crying for the loss of the nursery, not for the pain of her husband. Marcus, she sobbed. Baby, please, tell them to stop. Tell Audrey to fix this. It is just money. We can fix it. Just sign the loan and we can pay Audrey off. Marcus turned to look at her. His face was unreadable. It was the face of a man who had woken up from a long coma. Sign the loan, he repeated. You still want me to sign the loan? Yes, Jessica pleaded. We need the house. We need the nursery. Think of the baby. Marcus walked over to her. He looked down at her. I am thinking of the baby Jessica. That is why I am leaving. Jessica froze. What? Marcus reached for his left hand. He twisted the gold wedding band. It was tight. He had to pull hard to get it over his knuckle. I know about the credit card, he said. Audrey showed me. Jessica's eyes widened. She stopped crying instantly. I know about the shoes, Marcus continued. I know about the spa days. I know you weren't saving a dime. I was working double shifts, destroying my health, while you were pretending to be a princess. It was for us, Jessica stammered. I wanted to look good for you. No, Marcus said. You wanted to look good for them. He pointed at my parents, who were now arguing with the sheriff about packing their bags. You are just like them, Jessica. You knew they were broke. You knew this house was a lie. And you were going to let me sign my life away just so you didn't have to admit the truth. He held the ring up. The gold caught the light of the chandelier. You married a credit score, Marcus said. You didn't marry a man. He dropped the ring. It hit the hardwood floor with a tiny metallic ping. It rolled a few inches and stopped right at the toe of Jessica's expensive boot. We are done, he said. Jessica screamed. You can't leave me. I am pregnant. You have a duty. My duty is to my child, Marcus said, his voice breaking for the first time. And I will fight for custody. I will spend every penny I have on lawyers to make sure my child is not raised by wolves. But as for you and me, it is over. He turned to me. He looked exhausted but free. Thank you, Audrey, he said. I nodded. Go, Marcus. Go be free. He walked out into the cold Thanksgiving night. The sheriff stepped forward, clapping his hands. All right, folks, the show is over. Mr. and Mrs. Carver, you need to leave. Now, you can take your coats and your purses. Everything else stays until the moving crew arrives tomorrow. My father looked at me one last time. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. The bluster was gone. He looked like exactly what he was. An old man who had played a high-stakes game and lost everything. Audrey, he croaked, where are we supposed to go? It is Thanksgiving. All the hotels are booked. We have no money. I looked at him. I thought about the text message he sent me when I was in the hospital. Figure it out yourself. I thought about the years of manipulation. I thought about my journals burning in the fireplace. I reached into my purse. I pulled out a $20 bill. I walked over and tucked it into his pocket. Here, I said. There is a diner down on Route 9. They are open 24 hours. You can get a coffee, maybe split a sandwich. Audrey, please. My mother begged, grabbing my hand. Don't do this. I pulled my hand away. You have 24 hours to get your things, Mom. If you are not out by noon tomorrow, I will have the sheriff arrest you for trespassing. I turned to Liam. Let's go, I said. The air in here is bad. We walked out. Behind us, I heard the wailing start again. I heard the sheriff barking orders. I heard the sound of a dynasty crumbling into dust. We stepped onto the porch. The wind was cold, but it felt clean. I looked at the wreath on the door. I reached out and took it off the hook. I threw it onto the lawn. The house was mine now. The debt was paid. And for the first time in 30 years, I was finally home. The sheriff gave them exactly 20 minutes. It was the longest and yet the shortest 20 minutes in the history of the Carver family. I stood in the foyer watching them scramble. It was a pathetic sight. The people who had spent their lives judging others for their clothes and their cars were now stuffing their designer wardrobes into black plastic garbage bags. The same kind of bags they had used to throw away my childhood belongings just 3 days ago. The poetic justice was not lost on me. My father tried to take the silver candlesticks from the mantelpiece. The sheriff stepped in immediately. Put it back, Mr. Carver. That is a fixture of the home. It belongs to the LLC. My father's hands shook as he put the silver back. He looked small. He looked like a thief caught in the act. My mother was weeping loudly as she threw her cosmetics into a tote bag. She kept muttering about how this was a mistake, about how she was going to call the governor. But she didn't call anyone. She knew nobody was coming to save her. At exactly 5:15, the sheriff opened the front door. Time is up, he said. They walked out into the cold November wind. My father carried 2 garbage bags over his shoulder, his cashmere sweater snagged and ruined. My mother clutched her jewelry box, the only asset I allowed her to keep because I wasn't a monster. But the most satisfying moment was Jessica. Jessica walked out shivering in her thin dress. She wasn't carrying bags. She was running. She ran down the driveway toward Marcus's car. The engine was already running. The taillights were glowing red in the dusk. Marcus, she screamed. Marcus, wait. You can't leave me here. I have nowhere to go. She reached for the passenger door handle. It was locked. Marcus, she banged on the window. Open the door. I am your wife. We are having a baby. Inside the car, I saw Marcus turn his head. He looked at her for a long moment. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked resolved. He shook his head once, then he put the car in drive. Marcus, she shrieked as the car began to move. He didn't speed away. He drove slowly, deliberately, leaving her behind in the gravel. Jessica chased the car for a few steps, her high heels slipping on the stones. She fell to her knees in the dirt. She watched the only man who had ever truly loved her turn the corner and disappear. She was alone, truly alone for the first time in her life. I walked out onto the balcony of the master bedroom. My bedroom. Liam stood beside me, wrapping his coat around my shoulders. From this height, we could see everything. We saw the neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. We saw the Uber my father had called pulling up to the curb. My mother looked up. She saw me standing there looking down at them. For a moment, our eyes met. I waited for her to yell, to curse, to demand money. But she didn't. She just looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. She finally realized that the daughter she had dismissed as a calculator was the one who had calculated her demise. They loaded their bags into the trunk of the cheap sedan. My father had to shove them in forcefully because there wasn't enough room. They squeezed into the back seat. Jessica got in last, wiping mud off her knees, still sobbing. Liam squeezed my hand. "Do you feel guilty?" he asked softly. I watched the car pull away. I watched the red taillights fade into the darkness until they were gone. "No," I said. "I don't feel guilty. I feel light. I feel like I just dropped 1,000 pounds of dead weight." I turned to Liam. "Lock the door," I said. "Let's go home." We left the house that night and I never slept in it. I didn't want to live there. That house was a mausoleum of bad memories. It was a monument to their greed. 2 weeks later, I sold the property. Because the market was hot and because I had cleared the title of all the fraudulent liens, I sold it for $2.8 million. After paying off the $500,000 debt I had bought and the taxes, I walked away with over $2 million in pure profit. I didn't keep the money. I didn't need their tainted legacy to build my life. I used every cent of the profit to start a foundation, the Eleanor Carver Scholarship Fund. It provides full tuition and housing for young women who have been cut off by their families for choosing their own path. It helps girls who want to be accountants, engineers, and doctors. It helps the scapegoats become the success stories. As for my parents, they are living in a reality that hits them harder than any lawsuit. They are currently renting a one-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex near the highway. My father tried to get a job at the country club, but they revoked his membership and banned him from the premises when the news of the bank fraud got out. He spends his days sitting on a second-hand sofa telling anyone who will listen that he was robbed by his ungrateful daughter. But nobody listens. My mother has had to learn how to clip coupons. I saw her in the grocery store recently from a distance. She was arguing with a cashier over a 50-cent discount on canned soup. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like a woman who was paying the price for a lifetime of cruelty. And Jessica, my golden sister, the influencer, she had to get a job. Real life doesn't pay for nursery suites. She works at the department store now, but not in the high-end fashion section. She works in the returns department. Every day she has to stand behind a counter and take abuse from entitled customers who want to return used items. Every day she has to smile and apologize and swallow her pride. It is the perfect purgatory for her. Marcus filed for divorce and won full custody of the child when the baby was born, citing Jessica's financial instability and emotional neglect. He's a great father. We have lunch once a month. He tells me the baby is happy and safe. He tells me he is finally breathing again. I never gave them another penny, not when the car broke down, not when the rent was due, not when they sent me letters begging for forgiveness. I didn't block their numbers. I just never answered. I let the silence be my response, because here is the lesson I want you to take away from my story. People like my parents and my sister rely on noise. They rely on screaming, on drama, on gaslighting to get what they want. They think that if they are the loudest people in the room, they are the most powerful. They think that if you are quiet, you are weak. If you are serving them, you are beneath them. But they are wrong. The most dangerous person in the room is not the one shouting threats. It is the one sitting in the corner taking notes. It is the one who knows where the bodies are buried because they dug the graves. It is the one who is patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Don't ever underestimate the person who pays the bills. Don't ever underestimate the scapegoat, because while you are busy playing pretend, we are busy checking the math. And the math always adds up in the end. Sometimes silence isn't submission. Sometimes silence is just the sound of someone loading the gun. If you enjoyed seeing justice served ice cold, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find other people who need to hear this. And if you have ever had to be the villain in someone else's story just to survive in your own, leave a comment down below with the word karma. I read every single one. Thank you for listening. My name is Audrey, and I am finally debt-free. Stay strong, stay smart, and never sign a check you aren't willing to cash. I will see you in the next story.